What's up guys, Haze here. Today's video is going to be a bit different to my usual ones. This isn't a guide, it's not a showcase. Today I just want to talk about SM2, its endgame content, and then in particular Siege mode. When I say endgame content, obviously once you complete the intro to the story, you get access to all the content in the game. What I mean by endgame is the most challenging content available, which would be Absolute Operations, Stratagems, and Siege mode. Operations are the bread and butter of Space Marine 2 PvE. They got a great progression system with 6 difficulties, the ability to play them in a group, with bots, or true solo. Nearly all of them have got amazing map design, interesting stories, and are all fairly unique from one another in terms of aesthetic, flow, objectives. I would actually say clearing each true solo operation as each different class was one of the more enjoyable learning experiences and PvE grinds I've done in any game. That said, with operations, diminishing returns does kick in pretty quick, and now the only use I find for operations personally is just to test and showcase new or weird builds, or just something that's fairly chilled and simple that lets me interact with the stream a bit more. Stratagems are an interesting way to earn a unique currency that gets you your heroic weapons and armor. I think they're okay, but for the most part they're a bit of a pain, and as soon as I found out all the currency I need for the weapons and armor, I don't really look at them, or I only really do them when a new weekly comes out to help viewers. The problem I have with stratagems is that I don't play them for fun, as they're not designed to make the gameplay more enjoyable, and I don't really play them for a challenge either, because the challenge in them isn't quite applicable to the rest of the game. This is mostly due to the battlefield conditions that they've designed. Suffice to say, I think the whole stratagem thing is a little bit lacking, and though I like the concept of daily and weekly rotating challenges, stratagems isn't the one for me. But then we've got Siege. If it wasn't obvious by now, if you've seen my PvE content, I like Siege. Siege has got a lot of problems, but I like Siege. Siege is the only content in the game that isn't just a case of success or failure. You have varying degrees of success in waves completed. Because of this, every time you discover a new interaction, a dynamic between two classes, an economy approach, you can edge out a higher and higher score. It's also the only content in the game that really requires you to truly synergize abilities and coordinate with your teammates. In every other game mode in Space Marine 2, you might bring a certain class for a team perk, but ultimately you can do every bit of content as any class with any perk, even with Artificer or Mastercrafted weapons. It's just not really a challenge, but in Siege, you're trying to maximize out every tiny bit of performance, as it might get you over the threshold of completing just another wave. Besides the addictive nature of min-maxing out higher and higher waves, I also think the gameplay is just more fun and enjoyable to watch. It's intense, it's fast, it's a bit of a cluster at times, but when you've got 3 Terminus charging from each different direction and about 5 or 6 Extremis beaming you from the background, you're either locked in or you're just dead. It makes winning satisfying, especially if you do it smoothly and you manage to get through it efficiently without spending a bunch of money. So as a game mode itself, it kind of fuels the power fantasy and makes you feel a bit like a named Marine. I even actually like the timer aspect on it. It promotes you, if you're pushing for higher waves, to play fast and risky, to play offensive perks over defensive. It rewards more generally skillful execution and coordination over just kiting massives around a map for hours and hours. But then, there's the problems. Siege itself has its own unique set of problems which I'll get into, but due to the intense and crowded nature of the mode, it manages to exacerbate and multiply pretty much all the bugs that already exist in PvE. In fact, the game is so poorly optimized for Siege mode, no matter how good your PC is, your frame rate will tank, you get unavoidable input latency which just gets worse and worse with every round, and even beyond that, the game's own server will likely collapse and kill the game. We've all heard about the dreaded N2 error. We've all seen the dreaded N2 error. That being said though, the server issues have been dramatically improved recently, so huge credit for Sabre on that, thank you. Besides the performance issues themselves, which are obviously quite a large problem, there's been a few design decisions which have taken away from the pushing experience and added a bit of a frustrating aspect of RNG. For instance, when Siege mode came out, waves 5, 10 and 15 spawned in 1, 2 and 3 Terminus bosses respectively. Then every third wave of a new map would spawn 2, and every final wave would spawn 3. So that's like on wave 18 it would spawn 2, on wave 20 it would spawn 3, on 23 it would spawn 2, 25 it would spawn 3, etc. This has now been randomized though, so you can now get 1 or 2 bosses on every third wave, and 2 or 3 on every fifth. The difference in time to clear varying amounts of bosses is massive. As if it's just one boss, you can effectively delete it off the map as it's doing its spawning animation, which loses you a tiny amount of time and you get straight back into the rhythm of clearing the rest of the waves. If it's 3 bosses, just trying to delete the first one is a massive risk, as you usually have to opt for a 10-minute kite game of cat and mouse instead, which has got a massive impact on your overall runtime. Another issue with the RNG, though this one's much more of an inconvenience issue, is which enemy the game begins with is random. So if you want to start the game against Tyrannid and you load into Chaos, you have to exit out of the game, go back to the battle barge, reselect private mode, make sure the bots are off, and then queue. You have to do this every single time, and it takes 2 or 3 minutes, so it's a bit of a pain in the ass. There are more nuanced issues to go into for the scope of the video. Those are the chief Siege-specific complaints. Now, it wouldn't be fair to just point out the issues and call them out. I have got a few recommendations or suggested improvements that I believe would open the experience to more people, add consistency, and draw more players to invest in Siege as a game mode overall. Whilst I understand SM2 was not designed as a hyper-competitive PvE game, having min-maxed the team play over the past few weeks or months, I can't help but find it so fun and see this massive potential around it. It's got a similar feeling to working on a build in Diablo and pushing things like Greater Rifts or Pits, whatever they're called nowadays, or if you're like a WoW enjoyer, pushing Mythic Plus in dungeons. It just feels good to pull off these greater than individual feats by working as a cohesive, adaptive team. Now, of course, most of these games that have these sorts of time-limited, difficulty-creeping progression modes have rewards to incentivize pushing higher and higher. I do think in SM2 there should be some wave-based reward system. Now, it can be completely trivial in my opinion, like a tiny detail on your armor, the imprint on a purity seal, some Siege-specific title, it doesn't matter, but just some marker other than the number on your screen to say that you've reached a higher level. That said, if you're going to make more rewards, you need to make playing Siege more accessible and consistent. Most people don't have the near 4 hours of straight game time to push Siege to its highest waves. So for these issues, my suggestions are, firstly, to create a third difficulty. Have it start from approximately the wave 25 scaling level, and have the timer be maxed at 100 minutes, not 220 that it currently is. Additionally, removing the elements of RNG mentioned earlier, if you revert the boss spawns back to 2 and 3 for every 3rd and 5th wave respectively after 15, or if that's too much, make it 1 and 3 or 1 and 2, and then 3 every 10th wave. It really doesn't matter, just as long as it stays consistent. It also goes to say it would make a massive difference if we could pick which enemy we start against, or at least give a restart button so that you don't have to go back to the lobby every time you want to go again. Now obviously, I'm speaking out of my expertise with the next suggestion, but you can't tell me there isn't some way to further optimize the game mode's performance. Whether it's having shorter waves or reducing the Majoris, Extremis Terminus spawn ratios, tweaking the token system, the performance in Siege can be pitifully bad, and I've only played it on PC. Most people on console that I hear from don't even bother to consider Siege as so poor. It's a bit like beating a dead horse at this point, but I can't make a video about improving the Siege experience without bringing up the massive performance issues. So before moving off the topic of performance, let's talk maps. The existing ones are really cool settings. They have these unique flows that make them fun and fresh to play as you switch through them, but my god, the first map with its Breaking Bad Mexico filter and gigantic war going on in the background, and the third map with its Giga Plasma Rifle also going off in the background, their performance is so bad. I can't help but think that the map design is something to do with this, as when you go onto the second map, where it's an enclosed environment, the performance tends to be much more consistent. Hopefully we don't have to wait until the end of the year to get a few more maps in the rotation. Ultimately, I understand most people don't see Siege the same way as me. Operations are enough for the grand majority, and they don't have time or the care to push Siege, which is fine. But it's just something that I have seen enough potential in through playing recently, where I felt like I had to make a video on it. I'm curious to see how you guys feel regarding the topic, whether you have any suggestions for them to make Siege more fun or bring in more people, or whether you just prefer they spend extra time on more operation content. I'd love to hear what you have to say. It's been fun making a discussion video, as opposed to a guide or just a gameplay. So if you have any other topics you want me to cover, feel free to suggest them. Otherwise, I appreciate you watching to the end. You a real one. Catch you on the next.